London, 1666. Just after midnight, the city was asleep. No one knew that within minutes, London would become impossible to save. This was not a war. This was not an attack. This was a forgotten fire in a bakery oven. At first, the flame was small, then the wind rose, and the fire chose the city. Wooden houses began to breathe. Narrow streets turned into chimneys. People started to run. Children were lost. Babies screamed. Church bells rang, not for help, but for farewell. And the most terrifying part was this. No one knew what to do. London was burning, and this was only the beginning. It began with silence. No screams, no bells, no panic. London was asleep. It was a dry September night in 1666. The streets were narrow. The houses were wooden. The air was still. Windows were shut. Candles were extinguished. The city was holding its breath. And that was the danger. Inside a small bakery, deep in the glow of a stone oven, a fire was still alive. It did not look violent. It did not look threatening. It was just there. Someone failed to fully put it out. No one returned to check, because this had happened before. London was used to small fires, used to small mistakes, and every time people said the same thing, "It will pass." But this night was different. A faint wind began to rise. The fire inhaled. A spark escaped the oven and touched dry wood. One roof, then another. No one saw it. No one heard it. Because danger did not knock on the door. It slipped inside quietly, and London kept sleeping. People did not know that within minutes there would be no streets to run through, no homes to return to. Because the greatest disasters do not always begin with noise. Sometimes, and they begin with silence. At first, it still looked manageable. A few rooftops burning, a few sparks drifting in the air. People stepped outside and watched. Some carried buckets, some shouted warnings. Most believed it would end soon. They were wrong. The wind grew stronger. Flames leapt from roof to roof as if the city itself were feeding them. Wood cracked. Tar melted. Sparks flew like burning snow. London's streets were narrow, packed tightly with wooden houses. Once the fire reached the rooftops, it no longer moved forward. It jumped. Whole blocks ignited in minutes. Water was useless. Buckets were too few. Wells ran dry. There were no fire engines, no organized response. Only people running and fire spreading faster than fear. Then the heat became unbearable. The air itself burned. Smoke choked the streets. People dropped what they carried just to breathe. And still the flames advanced. Churches caught fire. Warehouses exploded. Homes collapsed inward like paper. By the time authorities realized the fire could no longer be contained, it was already too late. The moment to stop it had passed. London was no longer fighting a fire. It was facing something else entirely. A force that no one controlled anymore. And the city was losing. The bells were ringing, but there was no help. People were abandoning their homes. Belongings were thrown into the streets. Children were getting lost. Some tried to return home, but they couldn't, because the street was already fire. As the fire spread, something else began to burn with it. Control. London had no real fire service, no trained force, no clear command, only orders and hesitation. The one method that could stop the fire was known. Houses had to be destroyed to create fire breaks, walls torn down, buildings blown apart. But no one wanted to give the order. Property mattered, permission mattered, responsibility mattered more than speed. Officials argued. Messages were delayed. Decisions waited for approval. And while they waited, the fire moved faster than authority ever could. By the time the order finally came, it was already meaningless. The flames were too strong, the heat too intense. Even soldiers sent to help could not stand close enough to act. Crowds gathered, demanding answers. But there were none. The city was no longer being governed. It was being abandoned. Law collapsed. Order dissolved. People stopped waiting for instructions and began saving themselves. London had crossed a line, from disaster to chaos. And in that moment, the fire did not just destroy buildings, it exposed a terrifying truth. When leadership hesitates, disaster takes command. As the flames consumed streets and homes, they began to take something far more fragile: memory. This was no longer just a fire, it was an erasure. Churches burned first. Stone walls cracked under the heat. Wooden roofs collapsed inward. Bells melted. Altars turned to ash. These were not just places of worship. They were records of births, marriages, deaths, the history of families, written nowhere else. When the churches burned, entire generations disappeared with them. Then came the libraries, shelves of handwritten books, maps, letters, records, laws, the slow work of centuries destroyed in minutes. There were no copies, no backups, no way to rebuild what was lost. People stood in the streets watching knowledge burn. Some tried to save books. They carried armfuls through smoke until the heat forced them to drop. Many dropped them just to breathe. Warehouses exploded next. Barrels of oil, alcohol, coal. Each blast sent waves of fire across neighborhoods, pushing the flames even further. The sky darkened. Ash fell like snow. The sun disappeared behind smoke. Day turned into something closer to night. And through it all, the fire roared like a living thing. This was no ordinary blaze. It created its own wind, its own weather, a firestorm. Air was pulled violently toward the flames, dragging people off their feet. Some were knocked down by the heat alone. Others suffocated without ever being touched by fire. London was not just burning, it was being unwritten. Landmarks that defined the city vanished before people's eyes. St. Paul's Cathedral, believed to be safe behind stone walls, caught fire and collapsed. Hope collapsed with it. People stopped saying, "our street" or "our home." They began saying, "what's left." The fire did not care what something meant. It did not care how old it was or how sacred. Everything burned the same. And in that realization, London understood something terrifying. A city is not only bricks and wood, it is stories, beliefs, shared memory. And once those are gone, even if the walls are rebuilt, the city is never quite the same. When the flames finally moved on, they left behind more than ruins. They left behind silence. At a certain point, the fire stopped behaving like fire. It became something else. The heat grew so extreme that the blaze created its own wind. Air was violently pulled toward the flames, turning streets into tunnels of fire. What little oxygen remained was ripped from lungs. People did not burn first. They choked. The firestorm fed itself. Flames climbed walls, leapt across open spaces, and raced faster than any human could run. Roofs collapsed in seconds. Entire buildings folded inward as if crushed by an invisible force. The sound was no longer crackling, it was a roar, a continuous, deafening thunder of wood exploding, stone shattering, metal twisting under heat. Ash filled the sky. It fell thick and heavy, blinding those who tried to escape. Some people lost direction completely, stumbling deeper into the inferno without realizing it. Heat alone killed many. Skin blistered at a distance. Hair ignited instantly. Clothing caught fire without warning. Those who fell were rarely able to rise again. Eyewitnesses later said the fire moved like a living creature. Hungry, intelligent, unstoppable. Water offered no mercy. The River Thames reflected the flames like a burning mirror. Boats overloaded with families drifted helplessly as sparks rained down upon them. Some jumped into the water to escape the heat, only to watch the city burn from the surface of the river. There was no escape, no safe street, no refuge, only choices between death and survival by chance. This was not a disaster anymore. This was hell, built from wind, fire, and human delay. London was not being destroyed. It was being consumed, and in the heart of the firestorm, the city learned a final, brutal lesson. Once a blaze reaches this stage, no courage, no authority, no prayer can stop it. All you can do is endure and hope there is something left when the fire finally moves on. By the fourth day, the fire was no longer raging. It was tired. The wind began to weaken. The sky darkened, not with smoke, but with clouds. For the first time in days, the flames slowed. Then the rain came. Not enough to erase the destruction, not enough to undo the damage, but enough to break the fire's strength. The inferno that had devoured London for 4 endless days finally began to retreat. What remained was silence. No shouting, no bells, no roaring flames. Only the sound of water hitting hot stone and hissing into steam. People stepped carefully through the ruins. They did not run anymore. They did not cry out. They simply looked. Entire neighborhoods were gone. Streets no longer existed. Landmarks were reduced to blackened outlines. Where homes had stood, there were only piles of ash. Where life had been, there was emptiness. Families searched without hope. Some looked for houses, others looked for names. Most found nothing. The city smelled of smoke and loss. The air was thick, heavy, unreal. London still stood, but it was no longer the London people knew. It had survived, but it had been changed forever. The fire had stopped. The damage had not. And as the rain fell over the ruins, one truth became impossible to ignore. The city would be rebuilt. But what was lost could never be fully recovered. The Great Fire of London did not end with the flames. It ended with understanding. When the ashes cooled, London realized something painful. This disaster was not caused by fate, it was caused by delay. A small fire was ignored. Decisions were postponed. Authority hesitated. And when action finally came, it came too late. The fire did not win because it was powerful. It won because no one acted in time. London also learned that cities are fragile, not because they are weak, but because they are human. They are built from habits, from trust, from the belief that this won't happen to us. The Great Fire shattered that belief. It showed that one mistake, combined with hesitation, can erase centuries in days. But from the ruins, something changed. London was rebuilt differently. Wider streets, stronger materials, new rules. Not because people wanted progress, but because they had learned fear. And fear, when remembered, can become wisdom. The fire taught another lesson, one that reaches far beyond 1666. Disasters rarely announce themselves. They begin quietly, they grow patiently, they wait for inaction. By the time they are visible, they are often unstoppable. The Great Fire did not just burn a city, it burned an illusion that things will fix themselves, that someone else will act, that waiting is safer than choosing. History shows us the truth. Waiting is often the most dangerous decision of all. London survived, but its survive changed. And that is the final lesson. A city can be rebuilt. Lives can move forward. But the cost of delay is always higher than the cost of action. The fire is gone. The warning remains. Thanks for watching. Remember the lesson. Like the video. Subscribe for more stories like this.